On this week's episode of Rewind Toys, we're talking about plush, but not just any plush. Today, we're taking you back to 1986 to tell you all about the history of My Pet Monster. All right, so in order to do this properly, we actually need to start by taking a very brief look at plush toys in general, and overwhelmingly who they had been marketed to, and that was little girls. Now, that's not to say there hasn't been any plush intended for boys or that all plush were for girls. I had a favorite plush unicorn as a kid, as I'm sure many of you had stuffed animals you really dug. But up until this point, most plush figures were geared towards girls. But in 1986, AM Toys, that's American Greeting, the same guys behind Mad Balls, which we talked about in a very early episode, they decided to release something kind of for the boy market. And similar to Mad Balls, this was another creation of those characters from Cleveland, which was the team who, came up with certain toy lines. Having found success with Mad Balls a year earlier, it just sort of made sense that AM Toys would be looking for something else fun and sort of in that creepy vein. They wanted to pull in the attention of young lads, and what is creepier and more fun than monsters? I do say this a lot, at some point, but at some point we will discuss My Buddy and Kid Sister. But it's important to understand that in 1985, Hasbro released a doll intended for boys. By doing so, they broke a long-standing stereotype and helped usher in other companies to offer similar products. Couple that with what was popular at the time, movies like Gremlins from 1984 and Critters from 1986, and you can sort of trace the trajectory of where things went. 26 inches. These guys were massive. Blue fur, a big green nose, a stupid grin complete with fangs, and breakaway handcuffs. Now, we'll get into those handcuffs in a moment. This really was a cool-looking toy. The concept for My Pet Monster came from Ralph Schaefer, and the plush itself was designed by Susan Schaefer. AM Toys saw what they had, and, they just got it. This was a boy toy, sure, and they would push it as such, but girls could totally be into them too, so for AM Toys, this was a win-win. Now, as was often the case with 80s toys, this guy would inspire additional media, including the 1986 movie, which told the story of a boy named Max who was possessed by a statue that would change him into a monster whenever he got hungry. Now, this live-action movie featured additional characters like the evil Dr. Snyder, as well as Max's sister, Melanie. So after the movie, there was a single-season cartoon that ran 13 episodes. This time, the monster was actually sort of like Max's pet, who would turn into a stuffed animal whenever they put the handcuffs on it. We saw the return of the evil Dr. Snyder character, and Max did still have a sister, only now, for some reason, she was named Jill, even though she was voiced by the same person who played her in the live-action movie. Weird. So those handcuffs, I said we'd get into them, and we will. They were orange cuffs that either your monster or you could wear. The idea was sort of to, kind of bond with the monster. It also showed, that these monsters were rebels or whatever because they wore handcuffs. Now, aside from the big blue beast, there were My Pet Monster Minis, which were smaller PVC versions of the monsters. These things are really awesome. I like these a lot. We also had the My Pet Monster Pets because even a monster needs something to love, aside from, the kid who owned them or whatever. Gwonk, Wogster, and Rark, with a second series releasing Yaplet and Yiplet. I'm not going to lie, I actually kind of like the My Pet Monster Pets slightly better than the OG My Pet Monster, but hey, they're all really cool. We also had My Football Monster, who wore a jersey and a helmet, as well as Beast Fur, who was the bad guy monster from the cartoon series. They also made 20-inch versions of the monsters that were just, smaller versions of the monsters, and 16-inch, which were slightly different in appearance, most notably the plastic mouth as opposed to the fur mouth. The popularity of My Pet Monsters influenced other, we'll say, we're going to call them tribute or inspired toys and be nice, such as a series that I really loved, the Cuddly Uglies. That line was released by Terra Toys also in 1986. There's also a really sweet Spanish line called Los Temblores, and there are like a bunch more. But those Los Temblores are really cool. Check these guys out. I know there is a whole knockoff market, and these might be ones to go looking for. Now, in 2012, Saban Brands, yes, the Power Ranger guys. Oh, dude, wait a minute. We need like a My Pet Monster kaiju fighting the Zords. How cool would that be? But then, he's not a bad guy. So maybe they become friends at the end or something. I don't know. So Saban Brands purchased the rights and released their version. And then in 2018, Hasbro came in and bought them all up like Hasbro do, because Hasbro do that a lot. They like to buy the, rights to stuff. With that purchase came updated versions of the monster, which are but let's face it, nothing's going to beat the original. The original were just really cool. Yeah, they made it talk. They had talking versions and stuff like that, and it does look similar, but in our hearts, we know it's not the real one, right? I mean, it's cool if you own them and you like them, but it's not the 86 one. Okay, right quick, gang, do me a monster of a favor and hit that thumbs up, and then, make sure you subscribe to the show. It's really a ton of fun having you here, and we really want to have you back. So make sure you hit subscribe, guys. Thanks a lot. So, of course, there was all sorts of additional merchandise because, well, they really liked selling stuff to kids in the 80s. There were books, there were party supplies, and pencil huggers. There was a lunchbox. They kind of like that lunchbox, actually. I'm not a lunchbox collector, but there are a few, and that one's pretty cool. Anyway, all the typical usual stuff that you could market to kids and sell was made My Pet Monster and sold to kids. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. You're thinking, I love these and I want one. Probably probably some of you at least are thinking that. Now, maybe you're lucky and you still have one from your childhood. If so, that's awesome, because if not, you're going to pay up. You're going to pay up a lot to own one. Out of the box, they range typically from like $250 to $400. Now, that's for a complete 26-inch version, by the way. As is always the case, those are the numbers I saw when I posted this video. And in the toy world, we all know all prices are subject to change, and people are all the time finding crazy deals out there at thrift stores and flea markets. So it could happen. If you're really into the cartoon, you can find it on VHS. High Top Video started putting episodes out back in 1988. And if you want something a bit more modern, it was released on DVD in 2008 and 2009. So both VHS and DVD they're out there if you want to go watch the cartoon. Anyway, gang, there you have it. A small history behind the My Pet Monster. How many of you guys remember this awesome stuffed animal? Did any of you have one? Do any of you still have them? Let me know in those comments. And remember, gang, if you're looking for one of these vintage toys, the hunt, well, it's still half the fun.